I'll call it to order at 5 p.m. Ms. Adams, may we have the roll call, please?
Mayor Rick Mueller.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Rachel Gray.
Present.
Councilmember William Benning.
Present.
Councilmember Gwen Calhoun. Councilmember Sarah Pacheco.
Present.
Councilmember Carolyn Humphrey.
Present.
Councilmember
Yeah, I see you, but I don't hear him. Okay.
Christine Wolf.
Present.
Mr. Mayor, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Mrs. Adams, and welcome everybody. We'll start tonight's meeting as we normally do with the invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance. And I'll start with the invocation since Ms. Calhoun is here. We'll be followed by the pledge by Ms. Wolf. So if you pray with me. Lord, thank you for the blessings you placed upon our community. Thank you for the patience and persistence that you provided our citizens in this stressful time. We continue to treat our neighbors as we would like ourselves to be treated. And we thank you for that guidance. And we ask you to watch over our community as we continue to go through this challenging time. In your holy name, I pray. Amen.
Amen.
Next, we have the Pledge of Allegiance. Ms. Wolf.
Thank you, sir. Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the
to the United States
of America.
America, and to the republic, with the state, one nation, under God,
of
visible,
God,
with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please be seated. First item on the agenda is the acceptance of the agenda. Madam Mayor Pro Tem Gray. Can everybody hear each other?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
The agenda for the regular city council meeting of May 28, 2020 be approved as written.
Second.
Second.
It's been moved by Ms. Gray, and I heard Mr. Benning first on the second. Any additions, deletions, corrections to the agenda? Seeing no further discussion, I'll call for the item. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. Thank you very much. We now move on to the next item, which is the city manager's report. Mr. Patucci.
All right, can everybody hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, first, I guess I really need to start with why we're on Webex today. And it's largely due to the fact that we have an employee who is in the testing protocol for COVID. As a result of that, we won't know the results yet, probably for a little bit, but as a result of that, we determined to take the lobbies at City Hall buildings and bring them back to the status they were before. So all the lobbies are currently closed again. We're continuing with all the outdoor activities, but we've put many of our employees that were coming back into telework status as well. So we're kind of had a little bit of a setback here with this, but hopefully everything will turn out okay and we can get back on track after that. But as a result, we don't know what the meeting status will be for the June meetings. We have a work session scheduled for 3 p.m. June 9th here in the council chambers. And then the council meeting is scheduled still for June 11th. And hopefully we'll be back on a more normal pace by that time. Your budget work sessions are scheduled for June 16, 17, and 18, 3 p.m. Also here in the council chambers. Today, the governor had a press conference at 2 o'clock, and we're still in phase 1 there. So we have no guidelines loosening in terms of going to phase 2 on that. The good news, though, is that he is pressing forward with trying to open the schools on time. And I'm sure a lot of work will have to be done with the various school districts and the state superintendent of schools but that is his plan to try to have school open here for the fall. Yesterday, we also received good news. As you're aware, the state received some $2.8 billion in CARES Act funds a couple months ago now. And of course, we've been on the governor's office to try and see how that money was going to be dispersed. At long last, yesterday, that was announced. And Sierra will be the recipient of approximately $4.9 million in allocations to assist us through this challenging time. The best news about that is we're able to use that funding to pay for police and fire salaries and burden directly. And we're able to do that as of when this started in March, and then moving forward ahead. So that will be a big help to us in terms of our budgetary situation going into next year. And when we get into the budget work sessions and our discussions with you, we'll go over our proposal for how we plan to use that. Also, as I mentioned at the work session on Tuesday, Victoria and I did meet and make our proposal to the school district with the Rothery property, and we're working with them on their meeting, which is scheduled in June, and hopefully that'll be on the agenda at that time, and hopefully there'll be a positive outcome from the school board on that. So some of this is positive despite the situation that we're in right now. And finally, at long last, I'm sure many of you are aware of a house that's been vacant on 3064 Quail Run Drive. That's been gutted for quite some time. And we're now out for quotes that are due on June 12th for the finally being able to demolish that building. So we'll look forward to that happening here at some point here in the near future. And that's all I have tonight. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Patuchik. Before I ask for a question, I want to just point out that we've been joined by Mrs. Calhoun. Thank you, Gwen. And are there any questions for Mr. Patuchik on his report? Speak up or forever hold your peace.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, ma'am.
I don't really have a question other than just to let council know, I needed to pick up the budget books that are now due. And if you call Yvette, her or Rachel will set them outside on the wall for you to pick up.
Okay, good now.
And I will tell you, having on that same subject, having spent the last 50 minutes of going through the first section of the budget based on the recent change of the 4.9 million we're getting and the proposed spending plan by staff, there are a number of changes in that first section that are going to be affected. So as you go through that, you can just keep that in mind. And when you do have your meetings with staff, hopefully we'll have that clarified as to exactly how that's going to affect next year's budget. Yes, sir.
Mr. Mayor, just a question on that meeting with the staff. Is that still a go, or are we going to reschedule that, or are we still doing one-on-ones next week?
Well, the one-on-ones whenever you're ready to schedule it is what I'm told.
Okay. Yeah, we're planning on proceeding, Mr. Benning.
All right, thanks, Mr. Patucci.
I'm just saying that because numbers will change, and hopefully, if you go through there and look screwy, make a note, and that can be explained as you go through it and correct it as we normally do when we go through that process. Okay, and nothing else from Mr. Patuchik? Seeing nothing, I'll move to item number 2, Mr. Benning.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that the consent agenda consisting of the City Council special meeting minutes of May 12th, 2020, and regular meeting minutes of May 14th, 2020 be approved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded, and that was Ms. Humphrey, I believe. Did I get that right? Okay. Are there any discussion on either item 2.1, the minutes for 12 May, or 2.2 for the minutes of 14 May? Discussion, comments, corrections? Hearing none, I'll call for the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. Thank you very much. We'll now move on to item number 3. This is a public hearing item. Ms. Humphrey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that resolution 2020-025, a conditional use permit Haven Health of Sierra Vista, 660 South Coronado Drive, be approved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Can we ask Mr. Pregler to come up for his staff report, please?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So the city received a request from Haven Health of Sierra Vista to expand their nursing services on their property located at 660 South Coronado Drive, also located at the northwest corner of Coronado and Busby Drive. The expansion includes constructing a 10,000 square foot addition to the existing building, which will include 40 additional beds. Overall, the number of beds on the property will be 131. Now, the property is currently zoned multifamily residence, and according to the development code, a nursing facility is required to obtain a conditional use permit if located within an MFR zoning district. The nursing care facility is existing and defined as a legal nonconforming use. However, once the nonconforming use is enlarged or increased, as is the case in this situation, the legal nonconforming status is lost and the use at that point needs to conform to the requirements of the current development code. Hence the reason of the conditional use permit tonight. Now, staff analyzed the expansion of the proposed use to determine if it was appropriate for the site and came up with the following findings. I will go through these fairly quickly. Looking at the parking, the applicant will be providing a total of 81 spaces on the site, which does meet the minimum parking requirements for a nursing care facility per the development code requirements. Looking at the traffic generation, Haven Health provided staff with the proposed traffic generation of the 40 additional beds. According to the analysis, they estimate that each patient typically averages 2 to 3 visits per week. So with the addition of 40 beds, the increased traffic would be between 11.4 and 17 cars per day. Given the fact that Coronado Drive is an arterial roadway, which is nowhere near capacity at this point, the roadway will have ample capacity to handle the minimum increase in traffic generated by Haven Health. In terms of the access, there are currently 3 access points into the site, 2 from Coronado, 1 from Busby Drive. The accesses will allow for appropriate traffic flow entering and exiting the site, as well as for emergency access. Compatibility with surrounding uses. The Bonita Vista Apartments are directly north. Bella Vista Apartments are directly to the west. Both of these apartment complexes will generate more traffic and are more intensive than Haven Health. So the nursing facility would certainly be compatible with the adjacent uses. And then consistency with the general plan. The request is consistent with goal 12.7, which would increase housing choices that serve all age groups and needs. Looking at the public comments, staff did notify all property owners within 500 feet of the property. In addition, they published a newspaper ad in the newspaper, and a sign was posted on the property. Staff received a verbal comment from an individual named Angelica Thomas, who had concerns about the increase in traffic generated by Haven Health and an increase in speeding on Coronado Drive. No other comments have been received to date. Now, the Planning and Zoning Commission heard this item on May 19th and unanimously voted to approve the request by a vote of 6-0. And at this point, I would like to introduce, hopefully they're on the line, Tom Kaufman and Tanner Nickel, who are representing the applicant tonight and can answer any specific questions you may have regarding the project. So this does conclude staff's report at this time.
Well, I want to welcome the gentlemen if they're there and ask them if they have any comments in addition to Mr. Pregler's comments.
Yeah, this is Tom Kaufman. I had an unfortunate trip I had to make to Arkansas. Normally I would be in Arizona, and Tanner, I think he's incarcerated somewhere in Utah, so it's just me tonight. But no, we're glad that you guys are hearing this, and we took over the building 2 years ago, and we've done everything we could from a staffing point. Haven's culture is to take these niche markets and turn these buildings that basically have been failing by other operators and eventually turn them into 5-star facilities, which is a rating by the Department of DHS, Office of Long-Term Care. We operate 18 facilities across Arizona with around 2,200 employees. The facility there in Sierra Vista, it's always been our goal to reinvest in the community. We've been waiting for the right time. This COVID thing has changed a lot of things for us in how we operate and different things, but it's created some opportunities for us, and we're ready to move forward with all the physical plan improvements. Obviously, these plans were put into place long before COVID, so that's not the driving nature, but we want to be the provider of choice in the communities we serve. And it's time to improve that physical plant. Our goal would be to add all of the 40 new beds with private baths. And along with that, we would be renovating a large portion of the facility that's not handicap accessible. If you guys are familiar with nursing homes, typically the bathrooms are small, the resident rooms are shared. It's hard for staff to get residents in and out of bathrooms and shower rooms. And so along with the new addition that meets all of the codes, we're also taking a large portion of the building and gutting it and reconfiguring the spaces so that residents have those ADA accessible bathrooms. They can get in and use them, and staff can assist them more appropriately. We're also creating a larger gym for therapy. We're taking all of our office space out of what we call the main real estate area and moving them, into other areas that we're creating away from nursing, so that all of our nursing facilities, our nurses have access to just beds. We're improving our showering capabilities, nurse call capabilities, fire alarm, as well as upgrading our electrical services pretty much to bring 80% of the building under emergency power. And so we're excited about it. It's a major investment into the community and into, the physical plan of close to $4 million. And we're hoping we can get the approval to move forward and start this project soon. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Kaufman. We appreciate you speaking to us tonight with the details, and we really appreciate you investing in our community and especially upgrading the living quarters for many of our seniors who have needed the ADA accessible amenities for some time in our community. Council, are there any other questions for either Mr. Kaufman or Mr. Pregler?
I have nothing.
I see nobody jumping up. So if that's the case, I'll call for the question. Oh, excuse me. This is a public hearing item. Madam Clerk, is there any member of the public that wishes to address us on this item?
Mr. Mayor, no member of the public has requested to speak.
Thank you, ma'am. And since that's the case, I'll call for the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Not hearing an opposed. The motion carries. It's unanimous. Thank you very much. And thank you, Mr. Kaufman. Appreciate you being here. And Jeff, appreciate your report. We can now move on to new business. Item number 4, Mrs. Pacheco.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that resolution 2020-026, acceptance of a grant from the Federal Aviation Administration for pavement sealing and rehabilitation be approved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Mrs. Flassar, may we have the staff report, please?
Okay, can council hear me?
Yes.
Ma'am.
Okay. Mr. Mayor, members of council, this agenda item will accept a grant from the Federal Aviation Administration in the amount of $100,204 for the design of pavement rehabilitation work at the airport. The work area is along an apron and taxiway directly adjacent to the terminal. The design will determine the most appropriate repair method for each area given the pavement condition and use characteristics. However, the apron is expected to require some amount of reconstruction, whereas the taxiway will likely only need a seal coat. The design is expected to be complete within the current calendar year, and construction will then be programmed into the following federal fiscal year. It is anticipated that construction will qualify for a federal grant as well. The current design grant will be 100% federally funded with no required state or local match. As council is likely aware, airport grants typically require an approximate 4.5% match from the state and the local entity, with the remaining federal contribution being 91%. However, due to the CARES Act, all 2020 grants are 100% federally funded and no match is required. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mrs. Flassar. Questions for Mrs. Flassar? Hearing none, thank you. Thank you for your report.
Mayor,
Any further discussion?
Sarah has a question.
Sarah.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. This question we kind of touched on last at the work session, but I just wanted to clarify. It wasn't clear to me in the budget for this grant. It says the full amount goes towards the noise program implementation or development and $0 for planning. Does that, it just didn't make sense to me. Is it, can you explain that?
The grant form is a standard document sent by the FAA, so that wasn't anything we generated. The FAA gives us the grant offer. There's lots of, I'll call them unusual federal provisions in there. Everything from noise to wildlife. It's what they call their assurances. But the bottom line is this is a design grant for the apron and the taxiway area, and that is what the scope of the project will cover.
What or I don't want to say guarantee, but how can we be assured that we will get a construction grant after doing the design grant? Or is like the design grant required to get a construction grant? Does that make sense?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, Councilwoman Pacheco, there's not, I'd say, a hard and set guarantee, but it is as close to 100% as I think it could get. The reason for that is we submit a 5-year, what's called the ACIP, which is the Airport Capital Improvement Plan, to the FAA every year. And that outlines our funding priorities for the coming 5 years. So they have a good heads up on which projects we are going to be submitting on. They have told me verbally that there are no issues with a construction grant next year. Now, how COVID could potentially change anything in the budget, that's always hard to determine at this point in time due to the level of uncertainty. But at least at this point in time, we are not foreseeing any issues, and the design at least gets us through that phase of the project and gets us prepped for construction no matter what the future holds.
And my last comment was just a thank you for reaching out to the airport stakeholders and commission members. I saw that that was done, and they appreciate being kept in the loop. I know that for a fact, and so that communication between us and them is really important. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
All I have, Mayor.
Thank you, Mrs. Pacheco. Any other comments or questions for Ms. Flassar? Seeing none, I'll call for the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. We now move on to Item number 5, Mrs. Calhoun.
Thank you. Is my mic open?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that resolution 2020-027 authorizing legal action against Jody Silva be approved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Mr. Williams, may we have the staff report, please?
Yes, thank you, Mayor, members of council. As you recall from the other day, between 2016 and 2018, the city was required to perform several acts of abatement, maintenance type services at the property located at 140 East Freehage Drive, which is owned by Jody Silva. Some of this abatement included the cleanup of overgrowth, removal of litter, trash, debris, taking care of an abandoned swimming pool, and trimming a dead or dying pine tree that threatened to fall over onto some power lines behind the house. The cost of this abatement activity constitutes a lien on the property pursuant to Arizona law and Sierra Vista City Code. And so ordinarily the city waits until either the property sells or we work with the property owner to repay that lien in accordance with Sierra Vista City Code. The city reached out to or attempted to reach out to Ms. Silva many times through herself, through other caregivers, money managers, etc., other people who might have had some role in assisting Ms. Silva with her property, and received no response and no assistance. Earlier this year, the city received notice that Ms. Silva's home was going into tax lien foreclosure, and so in order to preserve our own liens and not have those extinguished by that tax lien foreclosure, we made the decision to redeem those taxes and preserve our lien. Under Sierra Vista City Code, if these liens are not paid within a certain amount of time in equal annual installments, the city has the right to foreclose its abatement liens. But in order to do that, City Council has to authorize the City Attorney's Office to take that action. Now, obviously, it's our goal to try to resolve these types of situations short of litigation. This is always a last resort attempt to pursue any kind of further legal action. But at this point, we're at a point where no response has been made by either Ms. Silva or anybody who may have had any role in assisting her. And this is the logical next step pursuant to our code. And so we're just asking for the council approval to pursue with legal action against Ms. Silva, which will include a demand letter and her execution of either a quitclaim deed or a promissory note, the repayment of these liens up to and including a foreclosure action in our own right to foreclose our liens against the property. That concludes City Attorney's report. Mayor, members of council.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Questions or discussion with Mr. Williams?
Mr. Mayor, this is Christine.
Ma'am.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Williams. I think this was a much better explanation than what we received on Tuesday. I'm still a little bit unsure of how we recoup our money. So then are we the ones who have to put it to auction, or does somebody else put it to auction? Because at this point, instead of the 4,000, we have to recoup approximately 12,000. I apologize, I don't have that in front of me because I only have 2 computers. So
that's okay. Mayor, council member Wolf, there are a couple of options that we can pursue. One is to have the county, after we go through the foreclosure action, assuming we receive the foreclosure judgment through the court, one is to have the county sheriff auction the property. The other option, which is the option that I would suggest we pursue, is to put that control into the city's hands. So under our code, we have the authority to ask the court to grant us ownership of the property, and then we would then turn around and auction it ourselves.
So then when we sold the property, let's say, just to make it life easy, let's say we did that and we sold it for 50,000, then we would subtract our 12,000 and then the property owner would receive the remaining 38.
Councilmember Wolf, that is one of the options that we can pursue, yes. It really depends on how we proceed through the foreclosure action. If we proceed as if this was a mortgage, then the scenario that you're describing is what would happen. If we proceed under our code, then we would keep any excess proceeds and place them into our abatement fund.
And what do we generally do then with that? Because I'm not sure that I feel super comfortable keeping proceeds over and above what we've actually spent.
Mr. Petitia, can you explain what we do with the abatement fund?
Okay. Actually, Mr. Pachuchek has asked that I can do that, and then Mr. Pachuchek can also jump in. Councilmember Wolf, that's a good question. This is the first time that we've been facing a situation where we may have excess proceeds as a result of the foreclosure action. This is kind of a unique situation. Most of the time when we have these situations come up, the properties are either underwater or there are other liens that come before our own liens. And so we've never had it where there's the potential that we would have excess proceeds.
So would it come before council again if we do have excess proceeds, what to do in the future? Because I understand the abatement process now. I understand this reasoning a little bit more. My concern is now the excess proceeds.
Sure. And I'll let Mr. Pachuca respond to that.
Got it. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Mayor Mueller, Councilmember Wolf, because this is a new precedent-setting situation, we would probably need to bring that to council to establish a policy or precedent on how we would handle these funds. This particular case is difficult because we don't know, what the condition of the current owner will be at such time as this happens, because it's going to take a while to all play out. But it seems the appropriate thing to do would be to do, as you suggested, take what's owed the public out and then hopefully give the proceeds to the individual who in this case may actually need those funds in the event that happens. And if we do that, we could establish that as a matter of council policy, that's how we would address these situations in the future.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I just have a quick question. I just want to know, there is no mortgage on this property, correct?
Excuse me, Ms. Wolf has the floor. Ms. Wolf.
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to say that that was my major concern, is based on what the property is. I would love to buy a property for 12 grand, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be more than that. And my major concern is what we do with the excess. And if we are voting on this with the understanding that in the future it's going to come back to council and we will make a policy at that time with, and I get that this is a weird situation. I do. I feel good. I'm done.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes, just in line with Christine's question, is there a mortgage on this property?
Mayor Pro Tem Gray, as far as what we are aware of, no, there's no mortgage on this property.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Williams, are there any other liens or anything like that?
Not that we're aware of, no.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
Hey, I just like to, I share the same sentiment that Councilwoman Christine had, but I'd also like to make sure we track hours spent on this from the beginning to that point. So those fees and those hours are also deducted from the price or from the sale of the house.
So you're saying we need to do cost recovery, and I think that's reasonable.
Roger.
Okay. And we'll have time to discuss the future policy, and I'll just weigh in right now. I think we should probably get out what we put in. And obviously it should be dependent on what the person's position is, but it's apparent that this lady may need some assistance with the remaining funds, and I think it's the proper thing to do. But anyway, that's for future discussion. Any other items, comments, questions? Okay, then I'll call for the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none is unanimous. We'll now move on to item 6.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that Resolution 2020-028, dissolution of the City Council advisory bodies known as the Airport Commission, Arts and Humanities Commission, Cultural Diversity Commission, Commission on Disability Issues, Environmental Affairs Commission, Library Advisory Commission, Tourism Commission, Youth Commission, and the West End Commission, and reestablishing them as departmental commissions of the same names be approved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Mrs. Adams, may I have the report, please?
Mayor Mueller, members of council, as you are aware, over the past year, the mayor performed an in-depth evaluation of the role of the various city boards and commissions and presented his review and recommendations at a series of work sessions beginning in November 2019 through February of 2020. After extensive discussion and input from commissioners who were allowed to speak at work sessions, the council appears to have reached consensus on the change of the role of many of our city commissions to non-regulatory presence that is not a council-appointed advisory body. Approval of the resolution before you tonight would accomplish that. I will point out, after discussion at the work session on Tuesday, the admin directive was amended to include the provision that any changes to mission statements of these non-regulatory commissions going forward will be approved by council. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Ms. Adams. Before we go further, I sent everybody a copy of a email I received from Mr. Faulkner, the chairman of the Environmental Affairs Commission, with my response. I did tell him that I would ask that this statement be placed on the record. Does anybody have an objection to placing his statement on the record? Okay, so I will order that his statement will be placed on the record and open it up for discussion and comment.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, ma'am.
I'm not sure I fully understood Mr. Faulkner's statement. I read it in a bit of a rush, but I think it does need discussion and further explanation of what he is contending.
Okay, you gonna lead that, or you want me to lead that?
I cannot lead it.
You're the liaison. You're the liaison. That's why I asked the question. One of his contentions is he feels that, as is explained there, that the one commission that he leads, the Environmental Affairs Commission, feels the need to come back and talk to us about this specific item. My concern, as somebody who, and I believe, Gwen, you were one of the folks that talked to me probably a couple of years ago now, along with the Mayor Pro Tem, about the results of the previous endeavor to try to amend and change the commissions. And during the time, I decided I was, against my better judgment, as I said at the time, I would get involved and see if we could move the issue forward, that we would go through the process of evaluating. Since that time, and you said it was when, November 19? Since November 19, I have actually been asked by the Airport Commission to come out and talk to them about it, and we made some changes. I sat in on a meeting with the good folks of the
West End and Arts and
West End
Humanities.
and Arts and Humanities as well, and explained what was going on. There has been ample time for his commission to be able to come forward and talk to us about this or share their concerns. He did in fact speak at a couple of council meetings and shared his concerns. He seems to think that there's more to be done on making improvements specifically for his commission, but he has not offered specifics, in my opinion, about doing that. And I want to get proper input from folks. But once the council, as I was explaining in the memo, in my response, once the council gets to a point where we have a consensus, the time for the input is over with. And it's time for the council to make a decision. We either go or no go on this issue. And he's basically coming at the 12th hour at midnight before we make a decision to try to extend it. And he hasn't really given in my opinion, a solid reason why, or it made any specific recommendations that haven't already been considered from other commissions as well as in his own statements by the council. Does that help, Glenn?
It does to a bit. You know, what I saw was his reference to what appeared to be policy about how we're supposed to conduct this. And I wanted to actually ask you if, to your understanding of all of the policies related to this, we have followed any policies related to changes being made in commissions.
We've followed all written policies. I think we've been more than generous with commission input. If for some reason, whether he was a new commission chair or whatever, or he had people change on the commission that had a different attitude than before, or a different opinion as before that wasn't yet expressed, it should have been expressed early on. They don't to the last minute to be able to do that. Once the council gets to the point where we have a consensus, and you guys know this was a lot of work, not just on my part, but on your part, and a lot of thought went into this, and it is a significant improvement. So I'm ready. If you ask me, I'm ready to call for the question when the discussion finishes.
Yeah, we ascertain, and I remember Mr. Patuchik making comments about council being able to keep up with what's going on with these work groups and a review of how efficient it's operating at some point in time. And that decision was made or was included in the any paperwork related to the changes that are being made.
I'm not sure what you're asking, Glenn. Can you clarify, please?
Okay, I'll make an effort to clarify. Tuesday, when we discussed this, there was some discussion about council being made aware at all times of the changes that are being made. No, not the changes, but how the work groups are operating, our commissions are operating. So we wanted to.
I think what we're getting at is Mr. Patuchik did say that in his monthly report, there will be reports from each of the commissions that have met and what they're working on and what they're proposing. So you're going to get a feedback to the council on their activities through the executive report.
Okay, and my reason for bringing these things up is for anyone who's listening to hear this, and then just to be sure that it's what Mr. Patuchik said becomes record for this meeting. Thank you. I think you clarified those things from Mr. Faulkner's letter, and if I have questions later, I'll talk to you about it.
Okay. Well, does anybody have anything else reference Mr. Faulkner's letter?
And by the way, on account of his letter, Mayor, I believe I'm going to vote against this for the time being. Okay,
that's of course your privilege. Any other discussion?
Mr. Mayor, I have one.
Yeah.
This is Christine. I just want to say that I actually think one of the biggest things that I think is really going to be huge and completely beneficial for our commissions is that we are dropping it to 5 people. I know that a lot of my commissions have had problems getting a quorum. They haven't been able to meet because they haven't had enough people show up. And to drop it to the 5, I think is huge. And I think we're going to get even more input because they're going to be able to meet and be able to give us more.
Relieves a huge administrative burden also when you think about the number of commissions, the administrative burden for the staff as well. So I think it's a cleaner process. We're going to have to wait probably a year or two before we figure out if it's a more effective process. But I think we're headed that direction.
Yes, sir. I totally agree. Thank you.
Mr. Patucci?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I do feel this will be a more effective way to run, and certainly Ms. Wolf's comments about quorums and those kind of things have been an issue. So, it's our hope that the commissions will operate effectively, the same way they are now. So I don't see, that really changing a whole lot. It's incumbent on me then to present to you not only the information in terms of what's happening in those meetings and reporting back to you that in the executive report, but to let you know if there are other issues that come. For example, as Ms. Wolf pointed out, we have a couple of commissions that I don't even think have members right now. So, if we have issues in terms of bringing people on board to participate in those kind of things, we really need to bring that back to the council, and the council needs to have a discussion whether they want to keep that group going or get guidance from the council in terms of where we should go at that point. So, and we certainly pledge to do that.
And we do need to recruit for those 2 commissions, because the last point of the discussion was they are valued and we need input. So that will be a challenge, along with, if you notice, the youth commission is included in this, and that's because we still know we have to get that piece organized. So there'll be an upcoming change to the youth commission as well.
Mayor?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. I did share some of these comments with members of, one member of commission that reached out to me, and I just thought it would be prudent to share my comments that I made to him with the council on this change. That were my thoughts on this change. And there was a comment made to me that they were surprised, and in the airport commission, we have had this discussion many times. It's been on the agenda of the airport commission's agenda over and over and over, has been talked about, and they have all come to council work sessions and had discussions, and I do feel like we took into account some of the desires that they had. One particular, there was concern that there wouldn't be a connection between the council and the commission by making it departmental. And my comment to them was that I feel like this is actually a little bit more. We established an official feedback channel for the commissions, which I don't feel like they had before. Even though there were commissions, or there were like council members assigned, we kind of just had a standing item on our agenda to talk about commissions and if anything needed to be brought up. And now we have more of an official reporting function by including commission activities in the executive report. I think that this allows for more accurate, complete feedback and guidance from commissions that will be consistently delivered to council, regardless of who the council liaison is and who that liaison would have been. And I think I really agree with the changing in the directive for it to be members from anyone from the greater Sierra Vista metropolitan area. For the greater community area, this has long been an agenda item also, that it lifts the city limit boundary requirement for membership. And My other was that I think that this allows greater flexibility under the administrative directive, which the commissions really need. They, with regards to open meeting law and minutes and quorum, but also sticking to a posted agenda. That can be a challenge sometimes, that we have things that pop up that we want to talk about right now, but it wasn't on the agenda, and it wasn't, or something that needs to be discussed and it wasn't on the agenda, it wasn't something we could talk about. And so allowing some of that flexibility in the commissions, I think, will make them more effective. And I, you know, I'm trying to read my email. It's like really tiny for some reason on here, but the other thing that I had said was that this is really a changing of operating procedures, but it's not a change of, let's see, it's a change of operating procedures, but it's not a change of your function. So like the function remains the same, the spirit of the commission remains the same, but some of the standard operating procedures are going to change to make them what I think is more effective. And I do think we address a lot of the concerns, especially establishing a feedback loop where we will consistently receive accurate and timely feedback from commissions on a consistent basis. And I think that's a big positive. That's my comment.
I think those are all great points. I would say too that nothing in this document is going to change the ability for a citizen who is a member of a commission to talk to the mayor or a council member about issues that are before the commission or other issues that they have within the community that may not be of the attention of the community. So nothing prohibits that. So they still have the ability to talk to us and address us on issues. Any other comments?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, ma'am.
I would just like to comment that the comments made by the council members and Mr. Patuchik were very helpful in, I hope, helping others to understand these changes. And I, for one, who am not a person opposed to change, still have a gut feeling on this one, and I'm still having trouble with it.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing nothing else, I'll call for the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
The motion carries. Vote is 6-1. We now move on call to the public. We don't have anybody scheduled for call to the public according to the clerk. So we'll now move on to comments and requests of council. And tonight we'll start with Mrs. Calhoun.
Oh, thank you. I just am a little bit not a little bit, saddened by someone in close proximity to us having been affected by COVID-19, and wish them and all those others in our area quick recoveries.
Thank you, Mrs. Calhoun. Ms. Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have nothing other than let's be safe, and I hope everyone had a really good Memorial Day, and that while we were celebrating Memorial Day, we were thinking about what the holiday was about.
And happy anniversary.
Thank you. I can't believe my husband put up with me for that long.
Must be a patient fellow. That's all I can say.
I feel you. I can't even be mad.
Thank you, Ms. Wolf. Mr. Betty.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to send prayers first to Minneapolis. What's going on there is kind of crazy right now if you're not up to speed. And anyone affected right now by the fire in Ash Canyon, be careful, be safe, and listen to authorities. As far as COVID and having another staff member or a staff member going through the testing process, I just want to let people know we're still not out of this, but we have to be patient and derelict in what we do. But more than that, we have to be respectful for each other. I witnessed people getting in arguments today over space and what they were doing, and it takes a matter of seconds to say, excuse me, or just to move away. So just remember to be patient and have respect for your fellow being. And other than that, like I think Christine said, happy Veterans Day, Memorial Day. It was a great day at my house. Thank y'all. Be blessed.
Thank you, Mr. Benning. Ms. Humphrey.
I have nothing.
Thank you, Ms. Humphrey. Mrs. Pacheco.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to say thank you to the Southern Arizona Memorial Veterans Cemetery. I can't spit it out, but they did a great job putting on a virtual ceremony, and so did the fort. Did a virtual presentation as well. It was a great way to spend, a short morning, set aside some time on Memorial Day to remember those who passed fighting for our country, and stay safe out there. That's all.
Thank you, Ms. Pacheco. Mayor Pro Tem Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to say thank you to you for going and speaking to the governor about the state CARES funding, and I'm very pleased with the way they rolled this out, and just happy to see that the cities will be getting some direct funds to help with cost. That's all I have.
And thank you. Speaking of that, I did get the opportunity to look at the budget book briefly, and there will be some changes based on the $4.9 million that we're going to get. So be patient as you go through that. As for the fire at Ash Canyon, I talked with our fire chief before the meeting tonight, and he said he just talked to one of the Chief Savage that is down there assisting with the fire, and it seems to be under control. So hopefully that won't flare up. But again, this is fire season, so I would caution everybody that it's going to get hot, it's going to get dry. We need to watch where we throw cigarettes and and make sure that if we do have a fire, we've got the adequate devices to control it should the wind pick up. And it's regrettable that we had a situation where we had to close the lobbies in the buildings again. They will reopen at some point in time, and it's really through I would say it is nothing to really worry about. It's really more of an overabundance of caution. We want to make sure that we can take care of the city employees as well as anyone that comes into the city to do business. And we're doing basically the same thing that the business folks are doing in the community, and they're doing a great job of taking care of the customers and protecting their workers and providing the service. And that's going to be the way we live for the next several months, unfortunately. I've already heard discussions about schools opening up, and that's going to be a challenge. I would highly recommend when the school board has their plan together, they very early get with the parents, explain not only what's going to happen, but why it's going to happen in detail, so everybody can go home and think about it and comment on it and be prepared when the schools reopen in the fall to be able to have a safe experience for the kids. Ms. Pacheco, did you want to make a comment on that?
The comment on that is that the school board has put out a survey to all parents of children in Sierra Vista schools regarding reopening, and they are gathering that feedback right now. So I would just encourage parents and school children to participate.
They have started, and there'll be a discussion and education process, obviously, to make sure that they're successful in protecting the kids and the teachers, workers, bus drivers, etc. I think that's all I wanted to say. I appreciate everybody's efforts tonight. When we meet again at our next work session, we will basically have the next step on the commissions ready for you for discussion, and that is I'm trying to remember what it is, Jill. It's the policy procedure guideline for the boards and commissions, and all we've done is updated the current policy and procedures to fit the new situation, and we'll have a discussion on that, as well as eventually, hopefully, a vote to get that piece done, and then we'll be done for now with the commissions. So I appreciate your support and willing to work with me and getting me out to talk to the people that I need to talk to make sure we have an understanding of what we're doing and why we're doing it in that endeavor. Seeing no other business before council, meeting's adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Be safe.